We mentioned in the past that that when Yisro had come to see Moshe, when he left Midian and left his glory, Yisro had said to Moshe, either you should come to greet me on my behalf, and if not on my behalf, it should be on your wife's behalf. If not on your wife's behalf, it should be on behalf of your children. And Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, you must go out and greet him to give honor to Yisro. Why? Because he abandoned idolatry to become a monotheist and to become part of the Jewish people, to convert. Therefore, you must go out to greet him. So the Midrash says, we find that idolatry is mentioned 48 times in the Torah, and the laws relating to a conversion or a convert are mentioned 48 times in the Torah. So which means for the convert to leave idolatry, it's considered so significant that he went from one extreme of the negative to the most positive, to the positive. So it's 48 versus 48. So we said then, after reading the Midrash tells us in Pirkei Avos, the 48 levels to acquire Torah in its totality. And the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos in the 6th chapter mentions all the 48 things which a person needs to be able to be qualified to address every level of Torah that has to be achieved. 48. So we explained that idolatry is mentioned 48 times. The most extreme level of negativity, the antithesis to Kedusha, is idolatry. As the Gemara tells us that a person's idolater is considered kofach Torah kula. It's as if he denies the Torah in its entirety. A person could observe every mitzvah, but he does not believe in Hashem, and he does idolatry. It's like he does not denies the Torah in its entirety. Now, the Gemara tells us, I've created the evil inclination. Barasi lo Torah tavlin. What is the antidote to the evil inclination? It's the Torah. What is the evil inclination totally personified in its true form? That's idolatry. That's the most extreme level of influence of the Eitzara, of the evil inclination. Barasi lo tavlin. I've created an antidote for it. So to be able to fully oppose it at every level, even at the most extreme level, you need Torah. So what do you need to acquire Torah in its fullest sense? You need 48. The 48 levels, that's for Memches Dvarim Shetorah Niknas Behem. We explained this in the past. So over here, the Balaturim, he mentions Elad Dvarim. Chumash Dvarim begins, these are the Dvarim. Dvarim, Hadvarim, Ela Hadvarim. The Ela Dvarim alludes to three times. Remez, Gimel Pomim, Nemru. Meaning these laws were mentioned 3 times. One was mentioned to Sinai. The Torah was given at Sinai to Klal Yisrael. V'nishnu b'ol Moed, after it was given to Ol Moed. V'nishnu b'arvus Moav. And right before we went into Eretz Yisrael, before Moshe passes away, in the plains of Moab, again, Moshe Rabbeinu communicates the Torah. I'll call mitzvah, nishkusu yud gimel brisos b'Sinai. Every mitzvah, there were 16 covenants with every mitzvah. Yud vav b'ol moed, yud vav barvus moav. He's quoting the Gemara Sota. And if you add up all the various brisos, covenants which Hashem entered with us, Sinai, ol moed, arvus moav. So if that's chain memches, we're talking about 48 covenants. And we find in the Torah, there 48 times the Torah tells us about the negativity of idolatry. And the Torah tells us the laws which pertain to the ger, who's come to attach himself to the Torah, which was which came about through 48 covenants. So basically, what the Balaturm is saying over here, he's adding the Gemara in Sota, that if you add up all the brisos that were made, Sinai, or Aretz Moav, the number is 48. Okay, let's begin again. Ela Dvorim. Ashediba Moshe Kol Yisrael Be'ever HaYarden. These are the words which Moshe had spoken to the Bnei Yisrael on the other side of the Yarden, Bamidbar, in the desert, Barov, in the plains, Molsuf, opposite the Amsuf, Bein Poran, Bein Tofel, Velovim, Chatzers Dizov. So seemingly, the pasuk is referring to different locations. So we'll see in a moment. There are many of these references on that locations, but it's alluding to things, to times we failed in Midbar, when we violated and we failed on many levels. Ela Dvorim, Fishitei Divri Tochochos. Since the words of Moshe are words of admonishment, rebuke, Umona kan kol hamakom shechisu fnei hamokom b'hem, and over here we're enumerating all the various locations which the Jews, they had actually had angered God. Therefore, the Torah conceals what they were. What the Skirim b'Remes, it's only mentioning it on an allusional level, rather than allow it to be public knowledge. He's alluding to it, and through the allusion, we know what he's saying, but he's not saying it openly, directly, exactly what the failing was. And the Torah makes it a point, he's giving the rebuke, El Kol Yisrael, to all the Jews. Every Jew that existed at that moment, they're all present at the time of this rebuke. Why? Because if he only would have rebuked a certain percentage of them, those who were not present, those who were in the shuk, in the market, would say, he says, you heard Ben Amram admonish you, and you didn't respond, and you should have responded and said such and such. So therefore, the words that he had said, the admonition doesn't resonate with us, because we would have said differently. We would have responded. Therefore, he assembled all of them, every Jew that existed at the time. Every one of you are here. If anybody who has what to say, where you feel that the admonishment is not valid, respond. Therefore, the Torah makes it a point, El Kol Yisrael, that nobody could say that if he would have been there, he would have responded and not accepted the admonishment. Therefore, he's rebuking, he's admonishing Kol Yisrael, all the Jews. And earlier that when we went to battle against Midian, the Jews themselves had to actually be coerced to go to battle. Why? Because when they heard that the demise of Moshe was contingent on the victory, they had difficulty going to battle. So over there, Rashi cites Chazal. You see over here to what degree Chavivin, how beloved are the leaders of Klal Yisrael, that although when we rebuke them, they're adverse to it, and they even want to stone us, but yet when they realize that we're not going to be there to lead them, there's this pushback. They don't want to hear about it. There's this resistance. I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu, these are the last 36 days of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. Moshe Rabbeinu, 36 days, is going to be 120 years old. As he says in Zosah Bracha, today I was born, today I'm dying. Today I'm leaving the world. Moshe Rabbeinu, at this moment, all of a sudden, every Jew is coming to a moment of reality and truth. This is the man who took us out of Egypt. He brought about the 10 plagues. He went to Shamayim to receive the Torah on our behalf. Only through him do we become the Jewish people. Do we have a relation with Hashem? As a result of our failing, the luchos were broken. We received a second set. He petitioned Hashem to forgive us. We received a second set of luchos to be reinstated. And every step of the way, whatever we are today, it's only because of him. Only because of him. And now these are the last 36 days of his life. And once he leaves, as great as Yeshua may be, he's not Moshe Rabbeinu. You can imagine what's going through these people's minds. So when he's given Musar, somebody comes and gives you, who are you to tell me? Because you don't appreciate the value of that person. But at this moment, because they know this is the last days of Moshe's life, and once he finishes speaking, he leaves this world, they listen differently. Because it's now or never. This person, this level of person, you're never ever going to hear from ever again. Until Moshe Mashiach, the Gemara tells us in the Hedron, a number of people coming back. This is before the full resurrection. Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron HaKohen, David HaMelech, they're going to be there at the time of Moshe Mashiach. This next time we're going to see him. So the person who's the greatest person who ever walked the face of the earth, besides the Avos HaKadoshim, and even them, they weren't at a level to be the equivalent of Klal Yisrael to receive the Torah at Sinai. He's speaking to them at this moment, giving them this Musar. And he's giving them Musar, as the Ramban explained, to explain to them, as badly as they failed, they were always forgiven. And he quoted the pasuk from Tehillim, Kim chaslich lamati v'rei. If a person knows that there's always a way to come back, and Hashem is merciful, when you do come back, that gives the person the mindset that even when he fails, he's not going off the cliff saying, what's the point of coming back? I'm going to be it anyway. I'm going to be punished. But rather, if you come back, you're going to be reinstated and be forgiven. There's a more confusion. Gemara says, Yisrael shechot to api shechot to Yisraelu. A Jew, God forbid, becomes an apostate to the most extreme level of failing. He's still a Jew. That doesn't change. He may be a pagan, he may be an atheist, heretic, whatever he is. Doesn't keep any of the mitzvahs. He's still a Jew. If he marries a woman, a Jewish woman, the woman's married. If he tithes truma, the truma is valid. Tevel, it's a valid tithing because he's a Jew. That doesn't change. Even knowing that as much as you want to escape and believe you're not a Jew, you can't change that. But knowing that, what does that mean, knowing that? That if it's like a person has a son, as much as he alienates the father due to his behavior, but he's still a son. And the father will accept the son whenever he wants to come back. That's the reality. So Yisrael shechota Yisraelu, the Jew sins, he's still a Jew. Knowing that, and if you could communicate that to every Jew, that he's still connected, regardless of how far he's gone, knowing that is a very strong, attractive characteristic for a person to come back. You know, I'm too far gone. There's no such thing as Jews. It's too far gone. No such thing. If you want to come back, you can come back. It takes work, it takes effort to come back. It's like you pull yourself out of a pit. You have to pull yourself, climb that vertical ladder, or pull yourself straight up with a rope. It's not easy, but you're able to. And the Gemara tells us this: you have to communicate. Habol letar misaynos, so the Gemara tells us. If you want to make corrections, you want to do something positive, you merit special divine intervention. Misaynos, they assist you. You have assistance. You want to sin, Hashem doesn't give you assistance. He may not stop you from walking out of the door, to going off the cliff, but he's not participating with you. But to come back, he's always there to help you to come back. Bamidbar. He's telling them in the desert. So Rashi cites Chazal. Lo b'midbar you Moab. At this moment, they're not in the midbar, not in the desert. They're in the plains of Moab. What he's alluding to, when they angered Hashem in the desert, just had, it was the 40th year, and they start complaining. We've had enough of this wafer food. Who knows, maybe we haven't done our bodily functions in 40 years. The man is going to expand and we're going to die. Hashem sends vipers to begin biting them, and they start dying. And all of a sudden they do tshuva. And it's always this way. The Rameir Simcha of Dvinsk, in his commentary on the Chukosai, which is the Tochacha, he tracks the various generations of the Jewish people and how we fared spiritually speaking. We go into exile or uprooted and displaced. The Jews have everything taken from them. And at that point, the Jews are observant, committed to the Judaism. As they climb that economic ladder, they start shedding their Judaism. And when they reach the ultimate levels of achievement, many of them, they begin assimilating, total assimilation. So what happens? When that happens, Hashem always throws us off the cliff. And there are all kinds of decrees against the Jewish people until eventually everything's taken from us and we're actually thrown out of the country. And this repeats itself over and over, and he shows, and he says, he wrote this in 1910. He says, the next Holocaust is coming from Berlin. Why is the next Holocaust coming from Berlin? He writes this in a portion of the Chukosai, because the Jews in Berlin say that Berlin is the Yerushalayim of the Jews. I mean, the German culture, that's the new Judaism. When the Jew speaks this way, understand God says, I'm not going to tolerate. You're going to have to be taught a lesson. And ultimately, he says, therefore, the next Tochacha, the next Holocaust is coming from Germany. That's what he said. And it's exactly this. Bamidbar, I mean, here God carried you on his hands, treated you with kid gloves. You had the Anei HaKavod, we had the clouds of glory, we had the wellspring of Miriam, we had the food, we had our clothing didn't wear out. They were cleansed while we wore them. Our feet weren't swollen. There was no illness, nothing. What are you complaining about? The answer is because you believe you want to be independent. The person has that need to be independent. Why did Adam eat of the tree of knowledge? A human being is created with an ego. People don't want to be told what to do or how to do. Because Hashem says, don't eat of the tree of knowledge. Hashem said, so what did you eat of the tree of knowledge? Because in the essence, the core of a person wants to do what he wants to do. And to be told what to do, it's not simple for a person to accept that unless you see that value, it's for your gain. But if you don't appreciate it's fully for your gain, it's like you say, I understand, but. If you say you understand, but, if that but is there, that means you're not doing it unless you fully understand. I pointed out with Moshe Rabbeinu, despite everything that Moshe Rabbeinu was, he radiated holiness. They couldn't look at him because of how holy he was. He had to wear a mask. Only when he taught the Jews Torah did he take that mask off, because they had to see his radiance of Kedusha. But every step of the way, they had to understand. We mentioned the Medrash. When he came down with the Luchas Shnios, with the second set of tablets, he says, we're going to build a Mishkan. And only then, that will be the medium to have a relationship with Hashem. This is after spending 120 days in heaven with the Luchas Shnios. They said, so who's going to oversee the building of the Mishkan? That's the question they asked him. He says, my nephew, my great nephew, Betzalel ben Uri ben Chor Bat Yehuda. He's going to be the one. Right away, there were murmurings. Of course, his brother's the high priest. His children are the assistants. Now he's taking his great nephew to oversee the Mishkan. Who have heard of such a thing? After Moshe Rabbeinu, what he's done for them, what he's proven to them, who he is, what he is. How could you have murmurings? So Moshe Rabbeinu had to respond. He responds, says, to be qualified to oversee the Mishkan, you have to be endowed with divine understanding, so on and so forth. So then they said, now we understand why we're not qualified. He's more qualified. What do you need an answer? We have to understand. What do you have to understand? Moshe Rabbeinu is not credible enough to tell you that this is the word of Hashem. There's always, we have to know, we have to understand. And that's part and parcel of a human being. And that's the whole idea of humility. You have to somehow suppress that. Of course, you have to understand at a certain level, but at certain points, because understanding, it's been proven enough and established, saying I have to understand is what? Is a breach of faith. That's what it is. So Bamidbar, we're going to die of this. So all of a sudden they're being bitten by what? By vipers, they're dying. Oh, now we understand. Until then, we didn't understand. I mean, you haven't seen enough to understand, but that's just the nature of a person. You're just always going back there. The Rambam rules, it's based on the Mishnah and Pirkei Avos, having ma'od shval ruach. The Tana says you have to be very, very low-spirited, very, very humble. So the Rambam says, famous Rambam, in Hilchos Deos, that a human being, we always have to be at the equidistant point between the two extremes. That's the Shvil Azov. The golden path is the equidistant point between the right and the left. Right in the middle. So he says, so Rambam asks on the Mishnah, when it comes to humility, the Tana says, ma'od shval ruach. You have to be very, very humble. The only time you have to go to the extreme is when it comes to humility. Why? Because the nature of human being, it's like, you have something, if you don't hold it down, it inflates immediately. The ego of human being is, if less you suppress it, it expands immediately. So therefore, you have to continuously go to the nth degree to suppress it, and that's the way you maintain humility. Otherwise, it just bounces right back. Why? As we're saying, because that's the essence of the person. As much as he sees, as much as he knows, there's always so-called this infringement on his life. And therefore, he has to know why it's so beneficial and why don't I have a say. Well, regardless, it's been proven that you have no say. It doesn't make a difference. Bishvil ha'rovo, shechot balpor, bishitim b'arvis moav. He's alluding the story of Balpor, Shitim, Molsuf, Amashe Hemru B'Yamsuf, B'Vom L'Yamsuf. I mean, we're going backwards. When he's rebuking them, admonishing him, what's most recent? The 40th year, they complained about the Mon. What's most recent is what is the Balpor. They had failed with the Balpor, the plague of 24,000 Jews died. Now he's going back to what? To the Yamsuf. What happened to Yamsuf? We're caught between the sea and the Egyptian army, and the Jews started complaining. After you see the 10 plagues, after all you've seen, don't you think God is going to split the sea for you? Or God, you're not going to die here? They continuously defied Hashem wherever they were. So working back, so you'd say these people, they weren't 20 years old at the time. This is the new generation. So first we address where you were present, where you failed. The Man, Balpor, now we're going back to the Yamsuf. This is even at the launch pad, leaving Egypt. We're at 7 days later, we're already complaining. Even though Dan Yaakov is accompanying us all the way there, right? The cloud separated between the camp of the Mitzrayim and the camp of the Jews. They see it clearly. But when you're confronted between the Egyptian army and what? And the sea, you start complaining. That's V'yamru Yamsuf. They rebelled. There's famous Gemara in Brochos. Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda, he was on his deathbed and dying. And Yeshaya Novi comes to him and he says, do you know why you're dying? because you didn't engage in procreation. He wasn't married. Why didn't he get married? Because the Gemara says, he says to Yishai Davi, because I foresee my divine mission that I can have a son that's a Rasha. So because he's in the Rasha, therefore I don't want to have a child. Because the child that I bring into this existence is going to bring about such a Chil Hashem, and is going to be so evil, therefore I don't want to engage in what? Procreation, therefore I'm not married. So Yishai Navi says to him, firstly, don't get involved in God's hidden agenda. It's none of your business. You have an obligation. But because you failed, you will not leave the sick bed and you will die. This is what he tells Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda. Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda says to Yeshaya, his name was Yeshai ben Amotz. He says, Ben Amotz, get out. Why? Tachlu kublani beis ovi. I have a tradition from my father's household, from David HaMelech. Afilu cherev chada munach tzavaro. You listening? Even if you have a sharp sword on your neck and you're about to be decapitated, al yishayish min harachmim. You shouldn't despair from rachmim. Even the sword is on the person's neck, you should not despair from rachmim. Meaning you could recover. So whatever you say, it's contrary to what we believe. You know what that means? You have such a level of emunah that even if literally the last thread of life is there, person should not, you should not despair from Rachman. Hashem is there for you. Knowing that, therefore, what you say, I don't accept. But that's something, it's not cerebral. That's something you have to believe in your gut. This is what I received in tradition from my father's household. They're caught between the sea and the Egyptian army. What are we going to do? So what does Moshe Rabbeinu say to them? Hashem says, just tell them to travel into the sea. Only then, unless they have, the way the Orach Chaim HaKadosh explained, unless they have that level of faith, they will not merit this miracle. Tefillah is not going to help. That because they spoke out of turn, they forfeited their right of Rachmim. So they have to prove themselves that Rachmim should be reinstated, and to show that they have to demonstrate their unswerving faith, they got to travel right into the sea. Because Hashem said, travel, and they traveled. And once they did that, then the Rachmim was reinstated. Okay, let's see.
Rabbi, just technically, though.
He explained that one's length of life is preordained, and you have the obligation to live responsibly. And if you could take initiative to save your life and you don't, you're held culpable. You have liability. And he says, just as we said regarding one's responsibility, life and death. Identically, this could be a claim against the person regarding his health. He lives irresponsibly and his health fails. He has failing health. Mozo, to sustain himself. A livelihood. Hamalbush, clothing. Hadira, a domicile, residence. Hamidus atovos. Hashem wants you should behave appropriately. Laharchik shekenegdon, and the distance yourself from behavior which is not acceptable. Things don't happen by themselves. Things don't happen in a vacuum. Very often people say, why does he have such exceptional children? Usually these things don't happen by themselves. It takes a tremendous amount of investment of parents, decision-making, besides siyata d'shmaya. Of course, there's siyata d'shmaya, but the parents have to take initiative. Well, if Hashem wants to be subservient, it's going to happen by itself. It doesn't happen by itself. Years ago, when people used to look for a community, the first thing they looked for was, how close is the shul to their home? Is there a day school, Orthodox day school in the community? I'm talking about before the real yeshiva. Just the basic amenities that you need in the community. What kind of rabbi is in that shul? And if all these components weren't there, the person didn't move to the community, didn't move there, regardless of what the salary was or what the opportunity was. Because first and foremost was his family. That's first. His Judaism came first. Everything else was secondary. So we have to take initiatives on many things. In Bira Munoso, together with defining your Emunah. Because whatever initiatives you take, unless it's pre-decreed by Hashem, person's a farmer and he has to plow his field. You have to weed it, take out the briars, you have to irrigate it, you have to sow it, you have to plant it. So if you put everything in place, then you have faith in Hashem, you do yours. After the farmer does what he does, what else is he going to do? What happens if there's a blight, if there's a locust, if there's a drought? It's not going to help him any. After you've done everything you could do and acted responsibly, now you have emunah, because everything is what we have to take initiative up to a point. Beyond that point, it's beyond our ability. Now you have faith in Hashem. You know, the Shas is divided into 6 sections. And the Gemara in Shabbos quotes a pasuk, Zroim, which is the first section of Shas, plantings. It's called Emunah. That's what Zroim is referred to. And why is it Emunah? Because the farmer, as fertile as the soil may be, as quality as the seed may be, with everything going on, whatever he has, you have to have Emunah. You can have a hurricane, you can have locusts, you have things that are beyond your control. So on top of everything, after everything's said and done, you have to have emunah. That's the way it is. You know, very often, you know, person earns a living and you do many things and you compromise other things because you want to have that number. But again, it doesn't always prove out. People have illness, people have other issues. So after, when you do the accounting and you balance the books, you realize that a lot of that money that you earned had to cover certain expenses, which is only because of the circumstance you have those expenses. But if that circumstance wouldn't present itself, you wouldn't. So you needed that extra money you earned actually went to cover certain expenses, whether it's illness, whether it's other things. So you say like this. But you find many people not this way, right? Thank God their families are healthy and whatever, they have things because they have the means. But you realize many times, even if you don't see any negative consequences, but many things had to be compromised very often to be able to achieve that. What about a person who would have been samech b'chelko? Ezeu asher samech b'chelko. So Hashem says, but person say, but I needed it. You know, I had to have the nice home. I had to have this. I had whatever I needed. But Chazal tell us, who is the wealthy person? The one who's satisfied with his lot. If you would have been satisfied, as you should have been satisfied, all this extra, you wouldn't have to go to Vail to go skiing. You wouldn't have to go to where whoever is, or where they have that special kind of wardrobe. It would have been enough to have less. So the only reason why you needed all that extra, which we're calling excess in God's eyes, is because you weren't satisfied. But if you would have been made do with what you had and been satisfied, and you wouldn't want more, it would have been no problem. We had mentioned the Maral when we studied Pirkei Avos. It says in the Mishnah Pirkei Avos that if a person studies Torah mitoch oni, in a state of impoverishment, at the end, he will study Torah with wealth. And the person who's mevatel Torah bitoch osher, yivatel bitoch oni. And initially, Hashem gives you the wealth, and you don't study Torah. Hashem says, if you waste my time, there's no reason to give you the wealth. Hashem takes back the wealth. So he asks a question. The Mishnah tells us that Reb Chanina ben Dosa, he lived on a Kav Charubim Erev Shabbos at Erev Shabbos. So he lived on a Kav Charubim Erev Shabbos at Erev Shabbos, which is literally, humanly, barely, you're able to survive on that. So he was Oved Hashem Mitochoni. He served Hashem, sacrificed Mitochoni. So why did he ever become wealthy? He never became wealthy, Reb Chanina ben Dosa. He was the holy man, the miracle worker, but he never became wealthy. Sir Morales wanted to become wealthy. It says, if you study Mitochoni, so far you're going to study it, Mitoch Osher. Where was the wealth? Where was the payout? Sir Morales says, Reb Chanina Dosa didn't want it. He didn't want it. Material does funny things to people. He was Samech Bechelko at his level. He needed nothing else. He didn't want any distractions in his life. As they say, lean and mean. He wanted to have that level of clarity. The moment you allow other things to come in your life, you're doing well at this level, and he's okay. He's Samech Bechelko. And therefore, as a result of that, and I pointed out, it says, Dailo b'kaf cherubim. It's not he only had a kaf cherubim. It's Dailo. The Chazal make it a point, it was sufficient. He didn't want more. Therefore, he was Samech Bechelko. So all that other people they strive for, they want, it wasn't part of his environment, wasn't part of his interest. So he says, whatever you do, ultimately you have to have what? You have to have emunah. After everything's said and done. And a person has no right to rely on his faith in Hashem, that without working the land, without seeding it, without watering it, it's going to grow by itself, because Hashem says, you'll be that prosperous farmer. The farmer has to take initiative. After all the initiative, then you have emunah. Anybody who's in business, merchandiser, you have to take initiative. Hashem is the guarantor. The guarantor means a person's a debtor, he has to try to pay his debt. He can't pay the debt, the guarantor comes in. He doesn't have the means. But if you could take initiative, you have to take initiative. Don't think what you do makes a difference whether it's going to happen or not going to happen. If it's meant to happen, you have to take initiative. If it's not meant to happen, you can take all the initiative in the world. It's not happening. But factually, you have to try it. The Gemara tells us a chumin. What happens if a person tries? It doesn't work. You try again. But after you realize, after all the initiative, it's not working, you better take a back seat. That's called good money after bad money. That's what it is. Right now, Hashem doesn't want your situation, financial situations to change. Therefore, you take the back seat, wait and see. Certain time passes, try again. But without any interruption, just keep putting good bad money after bad money, you don't know a thing, because Hashem is telling you clearly, it's not happening. Let's see the halacha.